Welcome back. Welcome my friends Lauren Champa and Amy Thompson for audience participation. I'll take it.
Hi, guys. All right. Our daughter's senior year of high school was pure hell. She only applied to 2 schools. Neither was a Montana school. First was Duke. She was not accepted. Second was in North Carolina. At $40,000 a year, she would blow her whole education fund. She was accepted, but got smart and realized it was not affordable. MSU college weekend was coming up, and her father, a bobcat, told her we were going. I'm a Grizz, although, sitting in the ballroom with hundreds of people who were bobcats. Stranger in a strange land. It felt like all's well, she's a cat and loves MSU.
Once while recreating in a bar in the woods, I decided it was time for a nap and went to lay down in my friend's white Subaru. While my friend spent the next hour searching the woods and a riverbank for me, I was found when a stranger entered her white Subaru heading home. A stranger in a sea of white Subarus.
All right, we got a long one, but this is good. I was on a canoe trip in Big Bend National Park, where the Rio Grande is the border between the US and Mexico. It was the last night of what had been a carefree adventure when the first party we'd seen in days pulls up to our beach to solicit help with a tragedy upstream. Simultaneously, a few good old Texas oil boys motor up from downstream. They offered to motorboat the 2 women in need to cell phone service, but in order to do so, needed to drop their friends, Will and Tom, on our beach. Will's first question was the difference between a kayak and a canoe. We explained the difference based off of the paddles, to which he responded, "You're trying to tell me that if I'm in a kayak and I get so drunk I can only paddle on one side, then suddenly I'm in a canoe?" Similar hilarity ensued between our hippie millennial group and these Texan oil workers before their buddies returned only to announce that Will and Tom had to paddle the boats the distressed parties left behind. The boat, complete with their 2 dogs, was so tippy, but those guys were 0 to 100 and left us on the beach to contemplate just how strange a land we were in.
Once passing through the Midwest, my ex-wife and I noticed an old man sneak into the county fair we were attending on Bring Your Grandparents to the Fair for Free Day. She had little patience for the odd people I like to chat with, and she left me with him and went to look at the pigs. "Are you 2 married?" he asked. I nodded. He said, "You want to be careful with that. My ex-wife tried to kill me 3 times. My face screwed up in disbelief. "Yep," he went on. "She poisoned me with arsenic, stabbed me 3 times with a kitchen knife, and had her boyfriend clobber me with a hammer." I was about to call him on this when he raised his hat and revealed a 1/2-inch deep furrow 3 inches along at the top of his bald head. Was I the stranger or was he?
I pulled into Missoula in September with y'alls in my bag, a yes ma'am or 2 in my pocket, and my mama's hug still around my neck. The Blue Ridge behind me, the Rockies standing sentry into all that lay ahead. A new helping career, a little blue house, a place where outdoor pursuit is palpable, the community's hands are capable. Creeks are water formation, and the only pain in the neck is the gray of winter. I came with a southern shyness, new on skis and in the Big West, but welcomed we've been. I'm happy to have landed west of this divide. The real one and the real people in this place prove doesn't exist.
A stranger to fly fishing and a stranger to fly fishing on the Little Spokane River, a tributary to the Spokane River, my guide and the other half of the campus mail and furniture moving crew advised me to set the hook immediately once I saw the bite. Within 20 minutes, I got a bite, and with an Olympian's athleticism, set the 4-inch trout 10 feet in the air, only to continue swimming upriver on the Little Spokane.
I took a subway from Oz to Kansas. Actually, it was from West to East Berlin. The West was all bright lights and decadence, while the East was army gray and discipline. I was dressed like Sergeant Pepper, and my Brit buddy, Mick, looked like Buffalo Bill. We were a center of attention for Soviet soldiers and the Politsi. Mick and I had a bad beer in a beer hall and got the hell out of Dodge before sundown.
In the middle of 9th grade, my family moved from New York State to liberal, by golly, Kansas. I was a dancer and was in the habit of wearing my homemade, flowy, swirly dance costumes to school. The popular girls' clique could hardly wait to see what the new girl from New York, city was all that they knew of New York, was wearing. But my clothes never looked like what they were expecting, their expectations primed by their fantasy perusal of their 17 magazines.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you, Lauren and Amy, for reading them. Dick King was born and raised on the High Line. He is a sugar beater from Chinook, Montana. Dick attended the University of Montana and received a master's degree in American history in 1971. That's the year I was born. After which he became a Peace Corps volunteer and served 4 years in Afghanistan. He returned to Montana in 1975 and married Tove Elv-rom in 1980. They have one son, Alex. Dick has worked in community and economic development and moved to Missoula in 2000. Please welcome Dick King.
Right up on the mic. Well, it is April 1975. I finished my time with the Peace Corps, and while I was there, I worked for the Afghan Tourist Organization. So now I'm headed back home overland, but so I'm a tourist. So I leave Afghanistan on a shuttle bus and head toward Iran. I get to the no man's land border, get off the shuttle bus, and have to walk to the Iranian fence. And I see some border agents. As I get closer, I notice they have weapons. They have pistols. They have some automatic rifles. Behind them is a machine gun nest. So it's a little bit disconcerting, and I get to the fence, and there's 3 guys that meet me. They take my backpack, lift up my shirt. They take my money belt, which has my passport, my wallet, my traveler's checks, and then they hold my hands up. Off comes my shirt, off come my pants, off come my t-shirt, so I'm almost naked. They then point to a tunnel. I guess I'm supposed to walk there. So I will go to the tunnel. It's concrete block, and I'm very disconcerted and nervous. But I enter the tunnel, the guy points me to go, 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 and walk through the tunnel. There's a few windows, and there's guards looking at me through the windows. The tunnel's leaking water from the top, so I'm getting a little wet. Finally, I reach the end of the tunnel, and there's my backpack and the rest of my stuff. I check it all, and it's all there, but I'm very disconcerted and worried that, where am I at? What's going to happen? Well, there's a shuttle bus now that will take me to the Iranian city of Mashhad, which is one of the greatest pilgrimage cities in all of Islam. So I get on the shuttle bus and start going, and there's a few other tourists there who didn't have to go through the same agony that I did to enter the country. But we start talking, and I tell them about my experience, about the border guards. And they said, those weren't border guards, that was the SAVAK. I said, the what? The SAVAK, the Shah's secret police. They run the border. They run the country. So they said, be very careful. Be very careful. We get to Mashhad. It's later in the afternoon. Find a place to stay. There's several wonderful mosques in the city. the night lights come on and highlight the minarets in the mosques, so it's quite scenic. And then the morning comes, and I go to the bus station and take a bus, get a bus ticket to go to Tehran. So I get on the bus, and I'm the only foreigner on the bus. It's full, but the rest of the people on the bus are Iranians. And there's no place to sit on the bus. So do I have to stand on a 9-hour bus ride? A couple of Iranians look at me and they signal me to come. They've moved a couple of people and they've opened a seat for me. So they've made me feel welcome. And the bus leaves Mashhad and heads, and it's kind of dry land. It's sort of desert-like, not very fertile. But in the distance, you start to see a little greenery and a few hills go farther, and those become more of a mountains. Pretty soon, we're driving up a pass, and the bus gets to the top of the pass, and I look to the north. There's the Caspian Sea. Incredibly gorgeous view. And the bus starts to drop off of the pass, and we head to Tehran. It's about a 9-hour bus trip and all. And we get to Tehran, and I go to the ticket office for the bus station. Where can I stay? Where should I stay? And they direct me to a student hostel just a short ways away. So I walk over there, check in, go up to the second floor, and there's probably 15 other young people while finding a cheap place to stay overnight. Put my sleeping bag on the floor, and that's my reservation, my sleeping bag on the floor. The next morning, I get up and I start to explore Tehran. It's an interesting city. It's very scenic, very well built. Buildings are very clean, well done. And I'm walking around. Here are some young Iranians, and they look at me, and they come over, and they start talking to me. And in Afghanistan, I could speak Farsi, which is a sort of a dialect of Persian. So I start to speak that, and the Iranians kind of look down on Farsi as not very good language. But we could start to talk, and then they asked me, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from America. Well, they pat me on the back, they're smiling. They said, welcome, welcome, we love Americans. And then one of them reaches over and grabs my blue jeans, my Levi jeans, which I don't have on tonight. And I want to buy those. I want to buy those. I pay you good money for them. I said, well, I can't afford to sell them because it's all I have. This and a pair of shorts for the whole trip. They talk it over and they look at what they said. Next time you come back to Iran, bring lots of jeans with you. Apparently, those were really a hot item at that time. And a couple more days, I go to the museums in Tehran. The people there are always full of help, where you want to go, what you want to see. And it's a wonderful experience, and I enjoyed my stay there. I then get on a bus and next go to the city of Isfahan, which is in central Iran. It's one of the major points of the Silk Road. You had Saudi Arabians, you had Egyptians, you had Europeans, the Chinese, all of them trading items in Isfahan. At one time, it was one of the world's largest cities. There are 5 bridges over the largest river in Iran that borders Isfahan, and these bridges were started to be built about the 2nd century AD. There's one of the bridges that is 33 arches. Amazing. So I walk each of the bridges over the river, and I explore the scenery and enjoy myself. And again, if I need directions, I ask in Iranian, no problem. The next day, I decided I need to visit the Blue Mosque, or the Shah Mosque, the King Mosque. It's pretty well known as one of the classic examples of Islamic architecture and design in all of the world. So I go there, and it's startling. It's the blue tile, the different colors of tile, the mosaic, and the calligraphy. The minarets, there's 4 minarets that go way up into the air. And I walk around and around it, and then there's a major entrance to the mosque and a big courtyard inside, but I'm a little hesitant to go in. And then the Iranian sees me, signals me to come in, points me in. I walk around the courtyard, and I can look in and see all the different excellent, wonderful art, very stunning. And again, the sun is shining and the tile is reflecting the sun. So it was a wonderful experience. It's about midday and time for lunch. So to tell the Iranian thank you for Tashakur, for the visit, and head out and we'll go a little ways. And Isfahan is also famous for its grand bazaar. Well, I didn't know where that was at, but I looked down the street, and there's a whole lot of people in the street gathered around. It's an outdoor market, a bazaar. So I head there, and gee, there's carpets for sale, there's, you name it, there's all kinds of things for sale. But I look at that, and I'm hungry, so I go to a restaurant, and not a restaurant, a food booth, and there's naan coming out of the oven, and there's charcoal, and they're making tacos, and it smells wonderful. So I start to talk to the guy running the place and order some lunch with that and this, and then I hear a sound. I hear a sound. Louder, louder, louder. Well, I was in the Army before I went to the Peace Corps, and I knew what military helicopters were because I rode in them. I look up, and here come about 20 American helicopters flying low over the mosque and over the bazaar. I'm stunned. I'm about ready to walk away. The louder and louder it gets. The Iranians are host like this, and they turn their back. They're mad. I want to leave. The guy at the food booth puts his hand on my shoulder, tells me, "You're okay, you're with us." I also remember attending a lecture by Henry Kissinger in Afghanistan a few months before I left, where he called the Shah of Iran the linchpin of American foreign policy in the Middle East. And that makes me shake my hand. After that, I go to Shiraz, which is near the Persian Gulf, and from there I visit Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the ancient Persian Empire. That's about 30 miles from Shiraz. We'll go there, and there's fabulous ruins. It goes back to the 4th century BC, the Persian Empire. Well, I took a shuttle there, and it gets about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we walked over it, everything, and looked at it, and all kinds of interesting things. And then there's a shuttle that leaves, so I was about ready to go. Well, there's a couple of Europeans. There's a Brit and a German and a Frenchman, and they look at me and they, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I got to catch the shuttle. I'm going back to Shiraz." No, don't leave now. Stay for the night show, the sound and light show. We're going to go to that. I said, "Oh," so we go get a bite to eat and things, come back, sit in the bleachers. The sun sets, and here come the lights on the ancient ruins that have been so well kept. They light it up. It's gorgeous. It highlights each of the architectural features. It's stunning. I'm just amazed. The lights go down, and all of a sudden, the Iranian people at the site, all of the ones that were running it, they turn their back away from Persepolis, from the ceremonial palace. Up pops a big screen. It's the Shah of Iran telling us he is the Shah, the King of Kings. He's basically saying, I'm related to Darius I, the Persian Empire, back way before Alexander the Great came and destroyed Persepolis. But the young Iranians turned their back to the Shah on the screen. Once again, I remember Henry Kissinger's lecture, The Lynchpin of American Foreign Policy in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Ibrahim Mina is from Caracas, Venezuela. He holds a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in journalism. He has more than 10 years of experience teaching at the primary, secondary, and university levels. He was honored as Teacher of the Year in Caracas in 2014. Ibrahim lived in Malta, Europe for a year and a half and arrived in Missoula in 2016 to teach at Missoula International School. He loves dancing, writing, and traveling. Please welcome Ibrahim Mina.
Hi. Let's start this telling you that I am super glad, very glad that I have survived officially 3 years, 3 winters in this land. I am not going to talk about my first experience in the snowball, though. My history begins in January 4 of this year. I was grocery shopping with a friend of mine. Her name is Ismara. Her and I went to the grocery shopping. I told her that I was going for another side of the shop, and she went to another side of the shop. When I was looking at the shelf, suddenly I felt someone that was coming. As is natural, I put myself out, letting that person pass. But that person didn't pass. I wait, he didn't pass. I started thinking that he was trying to provoke me. So I left and wait for about a minute so that person passed. He didn't pass. He stayed exactly in the part of the aisle where I was. And I started looking at the shelves too. So, needing to buy some sponge, I went back to the place where I was. And I started looking at the shelf, choosing the kind of sponge I wanted to buy. Well, that person told me that those sponges were good for me, that I should use them to take a shower and use them as much as I can to take my skin off. I was speechless. A lot of things happened in my mind in that moment. My mind was super confused. I felt vulnerable. I didn't know how to act. And I remember in that moment, a very bad experience happened to me last spring when someone stopped his car and started shouting at me, super mad. I was super scared because he told me that I was a black rat and I shouldn't leave. Having little experience didn't help me because I learned about racism by news, by book, by teachers. But living this kind of experience feels super different. So I went immediately to see where my friend Ismara was. I told her what happened. She was very sad as well. She told me that she was worried about herself because she's from Venezuela as well. But she started calming me down. She told me, you are a great person, and if that person knows you very well, she wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. So she started telling me beautiful things about how the person I was and making me feel better. I was so sensitive, so I left. But still, I left her for a little bit and continued grocery shopping. I was thinking, what should I do? I have to do something with this. this is not right. I was feeling mad at the entire situation and super frustrated because I didn't know what to do. Like, I have little knowledge about racism, and I also was frustrated with my English. At this point, I think you have realized that my English, need to improve a little bit. So I start thinking, should I go there and ask what's going on? What is wrong with my skin? I like that. Or maybe having a conversation to drive him to understand that there are more things that we have in common than the one that we have difference. I didn't do anything. I just went to line up, and after a while, someone passed with a few items in her hand, and I let her go. Well, she was super grateful. After a little while, another old lady came to me, and she told she had a few items as well, and I let her go. She couldn't be more grateful, really. She started talking to me, telling me that she really liked the kind of person I was, that she was looking around if someone offered that. And she was so happy. Actually, she told the cashier that I was so nice, and this is the kind of person we need here. I wasn't talkative at all. She asked me many questions, but I couldn't answer. I was very quiet in that moment. But she doesn't have any idea that she brought me back to the real people, the majority of the people I know, and I feel like people is here in Missoula. She brought me back to that beautiful paradise I thought when I first arrived here. Because that's what I remember of Missoula. Beautiful landscape, a bunch of hippies that smile to me when I am walking in the street, people that stop me in the in the store and try to have beautiful conversation with me in the bar. That's the real people I really appreciate in Missoula. Also, those that from the very beginning support me when I arrived here, people from Missoula International School, the best environment I have ever had. Students, my boss, parents, a lot of them present in this place now, giving me support. Well, after paying, Ismara and I left. I start the car, start driving, but don't remember anything else. But my friend Ismara on my side, a deep silence, a big sigh, and maybe 100, thousands of tears coming out of my eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Jesse Ballard is a local childbirth educator, lactation counselor, and birth doula. In other words, all things birth, boobs, and babies. She is married with 2 kids and loves travel, international food, and being involved in local theater productions. Please welcome Jesse Ballard.
If you're from Africa, why are you white? It's not just a line from Mean Girls, friends. That's the story of my life. Having spent the first 18 years of my life in Kenya, East Africa, and looking the way I do, I've had a bit of identity confusion, some dissonance in my life, and it's been hard for people to figure me out. Every phase of my life has had some confusing aspects as I've thought about who am I and where am I from. Except at the very beginning, things were kind of fun. It was kind of cool being the girl from Africa. In fact, every 2 years, my family would come to the United States to visit our extended family, and my brother and I were assigned the fabulous task of picking a cereal when we went grocery shopping. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about what a wonderland the grocery aisle, specifically the cereal aisle in an American supermarket is, but to my brother and I, it was amazing. We would just run up and down the aisle, the fluorescent lights illuminating a variety of colors and shapes. Everything was just so vibrant and exciting. Because in the 80s and 90s in Kenya, East Africa, our cereal choice was Weetabix. Are you familiar with Weetabix? I think it originated in England. Picture a McDonald's hash brown shaped thing, but hard as a brick and brown, okay? You'd have to pour a ton of milk and whack that thing with a spoon to be able to eat it, and then it was tasteless. So imagine my brother and I just overwhelmed by these fabulous choices in the grocery store. My first few years of schooling in Kenya were actually at a British school. So when I arrived there, I was seen as the American. My accent was received as very American. I also had some disconcerting moments there. For example, I told my friends when we were sitting down to have lunch that I brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, in British English, jelly is the equivalent of Jell-O. So you can imagine the looks on their faces when I told them that I was going to consume a peanut butter and Jell-O sandwich. I remember just feeling a bit like an oddball there. My voice sounded different, my experiences were different than a lot of the very British students there. And I remember coming home upset and just feeling strange on many occasions. But I got the hang of it, I got a hang of the British English, and then I ended up transferring to an American international school. So there I come in with my Britishisms, and I failed a lot of spelling tests. Neighbor, color, theater, those are spelled a lot differently. I also made the mistake, and picture this is elementary school, of asking to borrow a rubber in the middle of class. Now, it wasn't all disconcerting and uncomfortable situations. I have a wonderful memory of sitting under this beautiful flame tree in the middle of campus, huddled together with my friends from all over the world, my friend Carrie from Australia, my friend Martha from Ethiopia, huddled together with our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we'd have to duck. I say huddled because we had these big birds called kites, and at lunchtime they would just swoop down and attack anybody and grab their lunch, so we huddled close. We had amazing conversations, and a lot of my great memories are over that time. So that's where I did some elementary, finished up high school, then it was time for college. Now, the reassuring thing about college is that everybody was starting afresh, right? Everybody's figuring out who they are that freshman year. But what is that one question that you always get asked, or that I was asked? First it was, what's your name? Then, where are you from? Now, back in that last school, I had also had that experience where we were sitting around, this is in elementary school back in Kenya, and we were asked to come up to this giant world map and put a push pin where we were from. And I watched every one of my classmates go up there and confidently put one of those things up on the map, and they knew exactly where they were from. And I was anticipating my turn to go up there, and I thought, where am I gonna put this push pin? I knew that I was born in some tiny little town in a place called Illinois, but I would struggle to find Illinois on the map, let alone this tiny town. And my life experience said I was from Kenya, but there were people in that room who were Kenyan, and they looked Kenyan. What was I gonna do when I got up there? Where was I gonna put that push pin? And I remember getting up there and choking up, and tears started running down my face, and I couldn't put that pin anywhere, and I just sat down. So flashbacks of that are coming back to me as I'm at college, and everyone's asking me, where are you from? And I know they want the pushpin answer, right? They just want to know, yeah, you're from Chicago, you're from Butte, wherever you're from. But I couldn't give that answer. Excuse me. So what did I say? Well, I tried to come up with a quick answer. I knew the answer they weren't looking for. Well, in the 1920s, my great-grandparents came over as missionaries to Kenya, and then my dad was born, or my grandfather was born there. He became a doctor. My dad was born there, and he became an international school student, then a teacher. Then he went to the States. He met my mom. Then they had me, and then I moved back to Kenya. So, yeah. That's not the answer they were looking for. I also got involved in some things at college that made for some other weird cultural experiences. For example, I decided to join an improv troupe, which, for those of you that are familiar with that, is full of pop culture references, right? All this American cultural references. So here's all my castmates making jokes about famous pop stars and actors, and I'm over here making Richard Leakey jokes. So college was weird too. I remember going home for Christmas break, and wherever home was at that time, and coming back, and my roommate making an interesting comment, because I'd spent that time with my family and my accent had kind of got mixed up again. And she said, "Oh yeah, I forgot you were from Kenya." And that really struck me. I thought, what? She forgot? That's such a big part of who I am. And it got me just thinking about who I was at that particular point, that she had forgotten that that's where I was from or where I grew up. So I made it through college, cue the grad school era of my life, and my husband and I were living in a small town in Illinois, actually, and he was on campus and met two international students, Pauline from Kenya and Zanele from Swaziland, and he made the connection, "Hey, my wife is from Kenya. You should come over for tea." So here they come, and they knock on the door opens, and here's me standing there. We ended up having a wonderful time bonding over tea, of course, and all the similarities and differences between the parts of Africa that we'd grown up in. So it was a lovely time. And then later in our married life, we had the wonderful experience of going back to Kenya. And when I got there, I felt that my heart was at home in so many ways. We even went back to my old American International School campus, and I saw that tree where I used to sit with my friends and kind of ducked instinctively for those kites to swoop down and get me. And there was that red earth that we used to sit in. It's indescribable. You have to go and see it. And it would stain whatever you were wearing when you sat down. And the beautiful bright orange tree color. And it really made me feel at home in my heart. But on that same trip, wherever we drove, wherever we walked, the little Kenyan kids would yell out, "Mzungu! Mzungu!" which is the Kiswahili word for white person, foreigner, other, right? So it was this weird juxtaposition of feeling so at home and yet feeling like this total stranger in this land as well. So I found out that I do have a label, I do have a title. I am what is called a TCK, a third culture kid. And I've taken the culture of my parents, the culture of the country where I grew up, and I've mushed it into this third culture, this other culture. And it's still a learning process for me. It's still a growing process. I've learned to be more comfortable with being an other, but for sure, it still has its difficulties. But what's still fun for me is going to the grocery store and watching my kids in the cereal aisle and thinking, if only they knew about Weetabix. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. We have one more storyteller this evening. Carissa Benjamin is originally from Miami, Florida, and moved to Missoula in 2001. Eventually, making it her forever home, which she shares with her husband, 2 young children, and an elderly yellow lab. She works as a physical therapist for Missoula County Public Schools and moonlights as an ice hockey referee. Do not mess with her. She also owns and operates a mobile physical therapy practice where she enjoys working with individuals in their natural habitat. She also loves all things story. Please welcome Carissa Benjamin.
It's bright up here. Glad I can't see you out there. My story begins in a locked water closet in a bus stop in Nice, France. My boyfriend, Tim, is on the other side of the locked bathroom, and he is certain that I'm being electrocuted. He comes to this conclusion not just from my screams and banging on the other side of the door, but what he imagines are these rogue electrical wires streaming about and maybe some flashing lights that are coming from underneath the door. Now, Tim isn't typically one to panic. He tends to stay cool in these types of situations. I remember when we first started dating, he was the passenger in my 1994 top-heavy Isuzu Trooper, and I take the bad corner of Fall Creek Road a little too fast and begin to fishtail from one side of the road to the other. And from the passenger side, he just calmly coaches me through it. Put your hands on the steering wheel. You've got this. Well, I didn't have it. And I crashed off the side of the road, nearly hitting a tree. After checking in that I was okay, he just sort of moved into action, like he always does. Fast forward a couple years, we're traveling together throughout Europe for about a month. And even though I felt very prepared, I read all of the books, one thing that neither Tim or I had anticipated during our trip is just how difficult it would be to find a public restroom. It was so difficult, in fact, that I actually began wearing this one particular black cotton, very flowing skirt. Because what it allowed is when we couldn't find a bathroom, and so we often opted for a public space, green space, or park, that I could very discreetly sort of squat, use my skirt as a tent to preserve the modesty of the lower half of my body, and use it to dab as well if necessary. Tim, being the person that he was, I think was even more inconspicuous than I was, and he was a big fan of the soccer squat. For those of you who don't know what the soccer squat is, you basically bend over like you're going to tie your shoes, but rather than tie your shoes, you first check that you're sort of on the uphill side of things, unzip your fly, and try not to get your shoes wet. So we had lots of opportunities to find creative ways to use the bathroom, and which I have to say is really funny, because when I was upstairs during intermission, there were some ladies who were cleverly making their way out of the long, long line of the women's room. There was no line at all in the men's room, and some of them just went into the men's room. So when you have to go, you have to go. So another creative thing that we had done is we just basically tried to time our bladder breaks with food breaks, so we can combine those basic bodily functions like eating and peeing. But it was a little bit upsetting because at one time we had noticed that they'd actually added a charge on our food bill for using the bathroom. And we weren't really doing ourselves any favors because we are traveling in Europe. There's lots of delicious coffee. That's usually how we started our day, at an outdoor cafe in a cobblestone road, drinking 1, 2, 3 cups of coffee. And then we were traveling by foot and putting in lots of miles, so we're trying our best to stay hydrated, drinking lots of water. It was also 2017, and the women's national soccer team was participating in the World Cup. So it was easy to find an excuse to hop in a bar and support them on the television, so enjoying refreshing room temperature pints of beer. So essentially, we're fueling this trip on a parfait of diuretics. But to this point, no one had really been injured with this lack of finding a bathroom, unless you take into account our friend, our traveling partner, who had the unfortunate experience of contracting a nasty stomach virus and had an interesting run-in with a roadside porta potty. But that's not my story to tell. On this one day, however, things are getting serious. I really have to pee. We happen to find ourselves in this industrial part of the city center. So I'm scanning my environment. Okay, no green spaces, no restaurants. There are these really large concrete and metal sculptures, and I'm considering climbing in and seeing if I can find some place to seek refuge. But things have really moved past that point. I mean, my bladder is at the max fill line. I'm starting to walk really fast, but my steps aren't very long because I can't really risk being like this, because the pull of gravity, I think, is too great of a match for my pelvic floor muscles at this point. So I'm kind of, just trying to keep moving, keep my eyes on the horizon, and there it is, sort of this light in the distance, WC, water closet. And so, we scurry over there as quickly as we can, and I'm feeling pretty excited about this, and I'm not going to wet my pants. And I get there, and this particular water closet is coin-operated. And I actually, to be honest, I can't recall, if I was really disappointed. It was a problem. I just don't recall. Was it because I didn't have money, or I was just really irritated that I'd have to pay again to use the bathroom? And so these thoughts are going through my head, and there's this gentleman who's actually exiting the water closet or the bathroom stall, and I feel like he reads me. He sees the distress on my face, he knows exactly what's going on, and he holds the door open for me. So I'm like, great. And so I sneak in there, and I'm starting to really slow down now because I know relief is in sight, and so I'm taking my time, close the door. Maybe there's some Sade playing in the background. Not really. But so then I kind of back over the commode, squat down, pull down my undergarments. And it's not even a moment after I begin in savoring, the emptying of my bladder, that confusion starts to set in. Something's happening. My feet are wet, but I know I'm not outside. I'm over the toilet. I don't think I'm creating a backsplash. It's just more and more water, and I notice it's coming in from all around. And then as I'm starting putting that together, the commode actually backs back into the wall, and lights are flashing, and so I'm panicking, and this is the screams that Tim is hearing on the other side of the door. And so I'm realizing I need to make an escape. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what else to do. And so I rush over. Maybe I pull up my pants. I make it to the door, and the door's locked. And it will not let me out. And I'm banging on the door, and Tim's banging on the door, and I'm like, is this water closet possessed? I just can't figure it out. And then just as I don't know what else to do, things start to calm down. The lights glow again. The water's slowed to a trickle, and the toilet comes back out. And finally, the door unlocks. I exit the water closet to an onslaught of onlookers, and Tim there giving me sort of a once-over head to toe, notices I'm sopping wet. I kind of walk out in my chacos, water sloshing underfoot. And he just, I'm clearly dazed. I'm confused. And he just takes me gently by the shoulders and escorts me out of the bus stop. I still can't get my head around what's happened, and I'm sort of mumbling like a mad person. Like, what just happened? Why'd that happen to me? I don't know what happened. And it wasn't actually until I needed to prepare for this story that I looked into it. You know, what happened that day? And so I took to the internet, as most people do in this situation, and I went to YouTube and I searched for self-cleaning toilets. Maybe you guys already knew that that's what happened. But I sort of needed some confirmation about that. But the one question that sort of remained was that stranger who held the door open for me. Did he know? Thank you.